you think you're ready to go abroad and explore the world. I've been wanting to talk about this for about a year, and it's a pretty important topic to me because I don't like to see people get hurt, and I've had a number of my excursions in my lifetime interrupted by other people's follies, and I've interrupted enough of mine with injuries and stuff to know it's a significant issue. So what I wanted to talk about is medical emergencies on the road, or just basic health care on the road. This all started, my desire to do this video started because I was on Facebook. I was still on Facebook, and I'm watching this conversation go in an expat group about somebody asking for medical advice. And all these people were chiming in with their diagnosis and treatment plans. This person said, hey, I'm having this problem, what should I do? And everybody had their own idea of what's going on. Not a single person asked a follow-up question. I'm no doctor, this isn't medical advice, this isn't anything, but I watched these conversations and not a single person had a follow-up question, and I had at least 6 I would have asked her about history and this and that. And all these people, they were 100% correct in their assessment of what was going on. So I chimed in and said, hey, look, you should probably, if you're unsure, you should definitely go see a doctor. Seek legitimate medical care. And I got lambasted for it. All these emotional people, including an RN, chimed in and said, you don't know what you're talking about, you're stupid. Facebook, the typical I know everything crowd. So I told a story back then that was very recent, because I just received a phone call like a month or 2 earlier from a friend who wasn't feeling well, and thought it might have just been traveler's disease, a little Montezuma's revenge, but different country. He was out of the country on a business trip, and I said, if you're really not sure, you should go get it checked out. And he's doing his due diligence, kind of sorting it out, wasn't real sure what's going on. Called a couple other people he knows that were, far more experienced medically, and they gave him the same advice. And so he goes to the hospital. Hospital says, oh, you've got appendicitis. Here, take this antibiotic and go home. And I relayed that story online on Facebook because, appendicitis, it does kill people, newsflash. Especially if you leave it untreated, especially if you just try to muscle through it, knuckle through it. And all these people come back yelling at me, including the RN. You don't know what you're talking about. You can't treat appendicitis with an antibiotic. Oh, people just drive me nuts. Did you even take the second to Google appendicitis antibiotics? They didn't, because it comes up right away. You could definitely do it. It's a new procedure if you catch it soon enough. If you make it to the ER soon enough, they can try to treat it with antibiotics and then give you a bunch of stuff to watch out for, and then come back and have the surgery if you need to. So he takes the antibiotics, makes it home, he follows up with his doctor, everything's good, and fast forward a year, happens again, he goes in and gets it cut out. But ironically, he was going to have it removed preemptively, his appendix preemptively. But so here's the crux of the video. I'm going to tell you a couple more stories, but it comes down to these 3 things. Know what you know what you don't know when to ask for help, know who to ask for help, and then there's some books I think you should read. There's also a bunch of YouTube videos out there that are great on this subject. If you really want to dive into it, there's Overstay Road, King Marcos. I follow him, and he did a whole list, and he goes in depth about diarrhea and all these other things, and he's got some great stories, personal stories about this. But But it really comes down to know what you know what you don't know who to ask, when to ask for help, and who to ask for help. And then, like I said, there's a bunch of books you can read that will really catapult your knowledge into practicality and get away from this, idea that asking people online is a good idea. You should never ask the chuckleheads on Facebook for medical advice. YouTube is a good pointer, but Google's a good pointer, right? These are all tools, but you have to know the parameters of the tool you're employing. If you're going to Google, that's not a diagnostic tool for a reason. Now, the best answer this gal could have gotten out of Facebook is, hey, I'm here, where can I go see a doctor, and how do I go about doing that? Because she was out in a foreign country in a little austere environment, and I've been in very austere environments, and I needed to do some self-care and seek care. And you get those questions by asking people. I didn't ask people to figure out what's going on with my knee. I asked them, where can I go to get this? Where can I see a doctor? And then I got great advice and sent on my way. And having a little bit of medical knowledge from reading books, I was able to make an assessment that, hey, this doesn't seem like an urgent thing, and luckily it ended up not being an urgent thing, but I had to come to that choice because of where I was at. Do I make the decision to wait, or do I spend copious amounts of money to go get seen immediately? With joint injuries, what I've learned is there seems to be like a couple parameters there. If there's a blood flow restriction or something, you need to seek immediate care. If there's this type of injury, you need to seek immediate care. If there's this type of injury, it may not necessitate immediate care. And I self-assessed myself into that third category, made the decision that I would live with the life-crippling ramifications if I was wrong. And that's the informed choice I made, but I was able to make that informed choice personally because I'd done some reading and some background. So this all starts for me, way back in the, I don't know, should have had to be the early 90s, like early 90s. I'm on this hippie trip in Mexico, and this gal, we're all getting drunk all day and partying all night, and we're basically camping on the beach. A big bunch of strangers, get on a bus and go party for a week. Great trip, but and I was an avid backpacker at the time. I had this really great comprehensive, first aid kit, and this gal, she dives in the water, scrapes up her thigh. She hit a rock diving in, so she had all these long scrapes down her thigh. Total road rash with superficial and pretty deep, deep red blood coming out of some of them. And so she goes about her day, wakes up the next morning, and it is getting pussy and puffy and red, and just looks nasty. And I was cleaning a little cut on somebody's foot with my first aid kit. She comes over and asks me, and then asks around, and all these people are giving her crazy advice. So I was listening to her kind of go around the campfire. This one person's like, oh, put tequila on it, oh, do this, and this other person's like, oh, go find some seagrass and wrap it in seagrass, and that'll take care of the infection. And I'm just listening to all this, and I'm like, none of this makes sense. And these are some old people. These were young, inexperienced people. These are people my age now, giving her this crazy holistic advice. And my advice to her was, we didn't have rubbing alcohol. I was pretty much out of everything because I'd blown through my first aid kit the first couple days. And so my advice to her was like, look, there was a little scrub brush in the camp's first aid kit. I mean, their first aid kit was atrocious and, you know, just obliterated. But there was a little scrub brush for like scrubbing your fingernails. And I said, look, you know, I would go down in the water, get that, and scrub it and get every little bit of everything out of there. Every little bit of scab, every little bit of everything, just scrub the hell out of it. And then we had some, actually it was really good vodka. And I was like, you know, that's about the best thing we have. Closest thing to rubbing alcohol, the least amount of sugar. So, you know, I would rub it down with some vodka. Because if you just put a light coat of sugar on there, it's not like sugar packing it like they used to in the old days. You know, it's just adding food for bacteria. But I was like, I'd rub it down with some vodka and then rinse it with some drinking water and then wrap it and keep an eye on it. And, you know, I don't know how she got through the pain of that, because I looked at that and I'm like, I wouldn't even want to touch it with like a poke. And she scrubbed it. Like, she came back and showed me, she's like, do you think this is good? And I was like, whoa, yeah, that looks great. In my, you know, untrained experience, other than getting hurt a lot myself. So she rubs it down with some vodka, rinses it with some water, wraps it. Next morning there's just tiny bits of red around the edges, and she's a young, fit adult, takes care of it, boom, boom, boom. But it just blows me away, like the seagrass or the mud or the sand, you know, any of that could have led to a catastrophic problem. And you know, you really got to be careful who you ask. If you think going to Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or any social media and asking for medical advice is a good idea, it just isn't. You know, if you're not sure about what's going on and what could happen, you need to go see a doctor. For example, in that case, if in the morning she had little red lines going up her leg, or it was significantly swelled up or pussed up or anything like that, I would say, look, you know, you need to get evacuated and go see the doctor immediately, because this is a serious issue. You know, when people don't realize that a cut can be life-threatening, or, you know, I burned my foot, I don't know, it was like 6 months ago. I was in Triana, and you know, I had a blister about that big on my foot, and it went straight to open sore. It was like a, you know, it blistered instantly, and I put ice on it, and then that whole top layer of the blistered skin was just gone. It just like gone. And so I had an open sore on the top of my foot, and you know, it hurt like hell. Had some socks on them in the kitchen, some boiling water dropped on my foot, and by the time I got to it, you know, the damage was done. And so, you know, I knew to watch that open sore, because it was an open sore for like 2 weeks, and on your feet, you know, I knew to watch it very carefully and how to care for it, just because I'd been through this many times. But I didn't go to Facebook. I didn't go to Instagram and say, hey, you know, what do you think I should do with this? Because you're not going to get legitimate advice on there. And, you know, going back to my friend with the appendicitis, you know, or the gal, not, you know, when I told the story on Facebook about to this gal saying, you know, trying to encourage her to seek a doctor, what this gal had probably was nothing. But I don't know that. She obviously didn't know that, and this RN that didn't even know you can treat appendicitis with antibiotics clearly didn't know that. And she's an RN, a practicing RN. You know, said it many times that she berated me online. So even when you do go ask for help, you got to make sure you're asking the right person. Another example of asking the right person. So I mentioned I hurt my knee. So I jumped off a boat, my knee went sideways, and you know, I crawl up in the water, I'm looking at it, and I'm having a hard time standing. Like if I stand just right, I'd fall over. You know, it had no resistance. And so I'm like, oh man, this sucks. So the boat finally, you know, we're out on this day trip. We finally get ashore, I get on a scooter, I go to this little clinic. I'm sitting there in the clinic, and here's a doctor in his 60s or 70s. I think he said he went to med school like the late 70s. He's retired. He's just out, island hopping. He'd go spend, 6 months on an island working at these clinics, basically for free. I can tell you, I think I paid 800 Philippine pesos to get my knee looked at. I mean, the cost of the bandages I bought was like twice the price of the visit. Because I bought out all the bandages, ace wraps they had. I was like, give me everything you got. And it was good for them because it was a good markup, and it was a win-win for everybody. And I was able to make a splint to stabilize my knee and get through. But I'm sitting here talking to this doc. I explained what happened, and I didn't tell him what I thought because he's a doctor. He needs to make the decision. I don't need to seed him with what happens. And he looks at me. He's like, I'm a gynecologist. I know what a knee is. I know how it's supposed to work, but I don't know. I said, okay, so what do I do? And he's like, hold on, let me get on the phone. So he gets on the phone. Now we're in this little island in the Philippines. He calls Australia. I guess part of his clinical rotation, they've got specialists everywhere. So he gets on the phone. He's on the phone with an orthopedist in Australia. And the orthopedist is telling him, hey, do this, poke here, push there, pull there. And, they're going back and forth. I'm sitting there quietly, just being the dummy here. And he's got it on speakerphone. And it was the funniest thing in the world because the doctor in Australia is like, yeah, that guy's fucked. He needs surgery. And the doctor in front of me, he turns kind of white and his eyes go big. And it goes quiet, and even the nurses, like, in the front go quiet. They're behind the thing in the front office, and everything's quiet. And then the doctor in Australia is like, wait, am I on speaker? And I had a big old grin on my face because I thought it was funny as all hell. And so the doctor in front of me, he's like, yeah, thankfully he's laughing. I said, yeah, it's funny as shit, right? And the surgery, he believed I needed surgery, and he didn't, said it isn't urgent. It's just something you need to get looked at in the next, we talked about my logistical circumstances and, fly to America or try and have the surgery there or just wait and go home on schedule. And the wait and go home on schedule seemed like the best plan, but then I got home, couldn't get in to see a doctor. Once I saw the doctor, they were like, you know what? Come back it didn't even really do a good evaluation. They're like, come back in a month. If it still hurts, we'll send you to an orthopedist. Whole nother story there. And in that time, COVID hit. I couldn't really see an orthopedist about my knee for a year. And by then it was, surgery was out of the question, and, I had to live with it. So I spent a lot of time in physical therapy. And now I can walk, still clicks, still snaps, still pops, and walking is still painful, still swells. But the whole point of this story, remember, is know who to ask for help. The gynecologist, this is a doctor, a medical doctor, board certified in America, MD, credentialed to work in half a dozen countries. And he's like, I don't know. Let me call somebody who knows. Now, if a doctor is willing to humble down and say, let me call somebody that knows, so the words fail me about how stupid these people are on the internet when they think they have all the answers and they're not an expert. Especially with something like internal medicine or stomach or gastro. It could just be traveler's disease. But if my friend who was on a business trip out of the country just assumed it was traveler's disease and didn't go to the doctor and went to bed, he could have woken up with a ruptured appendix and had all kinds of problems. And at that point, if your appendix ruptures, it gets abscessed and ruptures, that's a coin toss on whether or not you survive. And what tipped him off is he's had traveler's disease many times, and he's like, yeah, something feels different. It doesn't feel the same, right? And that's kind of my point about knowing what you know, is if it feels the same, you know, you can make calculated decisions, right? And you can go, hey, and as long as you know what the risk factors are and you know what to watch for, you know, you can play it out and see what happens. You know, he could have very easily played it out and, you know, woken up at 3 in the morning and man, this hurts really bad. Now I'm going to the doctor. And they may have gotten it before it ruptured or not, but again, he knew what he didn't know, and he knew this felt different, so he went to the doctor. And you can find, you know, thousands of anecdotal, you know, individual cases like this, where people made a good choice or a bad choice, and then, you know, survived or didn't survive anyway. So the books, right? The books, if you're gonna go travel abroad, whether you're gonna go expat like myself, or go nomad, or, you know, just go on a vacation to an austere environment. You know, you're gonna go island hop in the Philippines for the first time, you're gonna go do this, you're gonna go do that. There's these books, this whole category of books, wilderness medicine, and they're designed for backpackers mainly, or people out in the wilderness. Damn, just trying to keep that going. So these books, they do a great job of breaking down basic treatments you can do and what to look for to tell you when to go seek further medical care. You know, and that, to me, that's really a key point to be aware of. You know, right now I've got a small infection on my foot. I've been babying, been watching it closely. You know, I'm in and out of the water every day. You know, I'm going for walks every morning, so my feet are getting a lot of abuse. And I got a little cut, and I'm watching it. And I know, you know, it's not getting better really quickly. It's not getting worse at all. But I know to watch it, clean it, take care of it, and, you know, I know as soon as it starts to go sideways, I'm gonna go see a doctor. If it never goes sideways, great. But I have that knowledge because I've done the background. I've read a couple of these books. Granted, it was back in the early 90s, but it gave me that base knowledge, and that knowledge changes. So, you know, even now, when I do get back to America, I'm going to pick up a new version because stuff changes, right? And it's a good book to have and thumb through and read. I wouldn't do an audio version, and I definitely, you know, or I definitely wouldn't do an audio version. I would hem and haw about a digital version because it's a type of thing where you want to go read a chapter, set it down, let it ruminate in your head, let it swirl around, play out scenarios in your head, and then go back and read the chapter. Because when you hypothesize about what could happen, and then you reread the chapter, you'll pick up more details that will stick and are very important. If you just blaze through it and you think you know everything, you know, maybe you're that type of learner, but I don't think most people are. I think most people, you know, you read it once, you get a general impression, you know, think about it for a while and let it ruminate, and, you know, look at things and think about stories you've heard, think about experiences you've had, and then you go back and you reread it and you go, oh, okay, you know, here's the important things I need to remember. These are the key, you know, key steps. You know, looking for that dark vein going up a limb, that's blood poisoning, or could be blood poisoning, and that, or sepsis, or whatever it is, right? But that's a red flag. You need to seek medical care immediately. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know, break the wallet, do whatever you have to. You need to see a professional, not a witch doctor, not a, you know, this or not a that. You need to seek medical care. You know, people. The other thing that I feel gave me an advantage is I read this book on the history of antibiotics, and it was kind of an abstract book. So it basically talked about how before we had antibiotics, all these people would die from, you know, seemingly today trivial stuff. And they talked about this one guy that had pink eye, and so when they were working with antibiotics, and so they're learning about them, so they gave him some antibiotics, and they thought it went away, and they thought it was cured, but it wasn't, and it refestered up and ended up killing the person. And you're like, wait, you died from pink eye? I had pink eye like a half dozen times when I was a kid, and it sucked. But you know, I literally had it like at least 3 times I can remember distinctly, and probably had it more that I don't remember. And that used to kill some people. You know, a simple cut used to kill people. And you know, we live in this great age, all this knowledge, and people want to ignore the availability of all this knowledge and experience and just go to the chuckleheads on the, you know, Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media they want, and you know, listen to these overconfident people who know exactly what's going on without asking a single follow-up question. It just makes me sad. Makes me really sad that people can't step back and go, I don't know this, let me ask an expert. I don't know this, let me read a book. Hey, I'm gonna go do this really fun thing, but there's some risks that, you know, inherent risks there. Maybe I should prepare a little bit. You know, if you're gonna walk into the woods, you know, maybe you should know what kind of dangerous spiders live in the woods or what dangerous plants live in the woods. You know, there's a plant in Australia, I forgot the name of it, but I remember reading about it years ago when I was in backpacking a lot and going, wow, it's crazy, because if you brush this plant, you'll get recurring pain. If I remember right, I mean, my memory may be gone here, but it's super painful. You'll get this recurring pain for years. It'll come back and back and back and back, right? Things like giardia. You know, the reason I was so big on water filters and, you know, did so much research on water filters is because, you know, I read a couple stories where people got giardia and died. Giardia is pretty easy to avoid when you're backpacking if you get a good water filter and you follow, you know, basic procedures. And there's a lot of things, you know, that are very avoidable if you know what to do. If you don't know what to do, you know, if you don't know the basics, then you're just asking for trouble. And you know, how tragic would it be, you know, you go on this great trip and you get sick from something totally curable and you never make it home for something that was 100% curable. You know, in this one book I read about backpacking, I forgot the name of the book. Ray Jardine was the author. And the first version, I think it's the ultralight backpack or something like that. But, you know, again, this is decades ago. And he was talking about, even when you're traveling, you're out in the woods, about how, you know, when you go to different areas, he was talking about doing the PCH, Pacific Crest Trail. And when you're out in the woods for extended periods of time, and then you go into these little communities, every little community has their own version of the cold, and everybody gets it, and then, you know, it kind of moves on, but everybody there's got it, and, you know, so when you come into a new environment, you know, you're very susceptible to that version of the cold. It's a really funny story. Not funny, but, you know, funny to think about, because here you're on Pacific Crest Trail, you drop in to resupply, get sick, and now you're like, you know, what the hell? And he was talking about, way back then, about when you go to the bathroom, you wash your hands, take a clean paper towel, use it to open the door, because that door handle's so dirty, and you can easily like pick something up just from the door handle before you go back to the restaurant. And that's assuming, you know, people are preparing your food appropriately and this and this and that. And then there was a story out of the military, actually, where these guys, there was somebody cooking food or something, and they had a runny nose, and it got in the food, a norovirus. Same thing you get on cruise ships all the time. So, you know, a virus from your nose can get in your food, and then it can make you sick, give you diarrhea, and, you know, all these other things, right? And so here, this one soldier or sailor or whatever, I think it was a soldier, I can't remember when this was, but it was a long time ago, and it talks about this group of military people. They all got this sickness, and they're running through the jungle, and they actually cut the back end, or the butt area of their trousers out because they had diarrhea so bad, and they had to keep moving through the forest. So they wouldn't even like take their pants down. They just cut out, remember the old long johns, how they had the old poop flap? They basically just cut a hole there so they could just stop and squat and then keep moving. But that all started, if I remember the story right, that all started with somebody's runny nose getting into their food. So when you're preparing food and you blow your nose, or you wipe your nose, or you do this, wash your hands. Because if you're out backpacking and you get this nasty diarrhea, that's a significant issue when you're 3 days from a trailhead. And I was backpacking when we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have satellite phones, we didn't have these fancy, push the button and help comes, and there was many trips. I was by myself, a minimum 2 days to a trailhead, and if anything happened, I had to get myself somewhere, or wait 2 or 3 weeks for somebody to come looking for me and hope they found me alive. So reading the books with that kind of pressure gave me a lot of incentive to know what the hell's going on. Now, how to motivate you to do this? How to motivate that sense of urgency in you. If you get 2 weeks off a year and you're going to go spend 6 months worth of savings on a vacation, that should be a pretty good motivating factor to make sure you're prepared to deal with any trivial things that come up, so you don't waste all that time and money. I mean, think about it. You're looking forward to a vacation all year. You got your 2 weeks, you're going to El Nido. You get there, you end up in your hotel room for a week, you miss your flight going here, now you're trying to figure out how to get home, and you can't go more than 10 feet from the toilet because you got to run back to it. You're trying to find people to bring you food. I mean, that was a situation I was in Cloud 9, Chargal, is, I had a hard time walking, so I was trying to find people to go to restaurants, get food for me, and bring it back to this little hotel I was staying at. And that one was hard. Even offering them, significant cash, they still didn't want to do it. They're like, yeah, I don't need the money. And it's not like I could just pick up a phone and find somebody randomly. And that's where Facebook, social media would be a good tool, because if you're in the groups of expats or tourist groups in that area, you can get on there and say, hey, I need help. Can somebody help me with this? Hey, can somebody get me to the hospital? Can somebody show me where the hospital is? Right? That would be a good use of social media. But to get on there and ask for medical advice is, I can't even describe how silly and disheartening that is for me to see people do that. Even Instagram, this gal, and she's not poor, I'll tell you right now. She is nowhere near the poor side. She wakes up with a kink in her neck and she's like, what do I do? I'm like, why are you on Instagram? Somebody with your wealth should just pick up a phone and get a doctor on the telehealth. Say, hey, I'm having these problems, and they can run you through those questions to make sure there's not something more serious happening, and then give you a treatment protocol. When you've got that kind of wealth, that telehealth is available, and that immediate access is available. And if you've got that kind of wealth, why aren't you tuned in and taking advantage of that? Why aren't you, telling other people that, hey, this is available for this price? And that's, I follow a lot of YouTubers, and the one thing that I haven't seen I'd really like to find is a good, nomad YouTuber who breaks all this down and says, look, here's a telehealth company that's available, here's their competitors, this is what this one does, this is why I like this one, because I know it's out there. I haven't done the work, I'm too lazy and too arrogant myself, right? I figure if I can't deal with it, I'm going to the hospital. And most of my life was spent on, in this tiny slice, was spent on learning how to resolve things. I could probably stitch myself up. In fact, pretty much did right there. I didn't use actual stitches, but I drove a knife right through my fingernail and nearly took off the tip of my finger, and I soaked it and I bandaged it back up, and I looked at it and watched it for weeks, and it the fingernail finally grew back together, because I split the fingernail because I wanted to be self-reliant. It's just who I was. But you don't have to go to that extreme. I'm going to put up some pictures of examples of books. If you're going to go on an extended vacation, you're going to go nomad, you're going to go travel the world, you're going to leave America, it would behoove you to read some of these books, or one of these books, or any book in this genre, this idea, so that when you go abroad, or at least have a better idea that, hey, this is serious, and this is something I can wait and see, and this is something I can deal with. So you really got to know what you know what you don't know when to ask for help. Remember, who you ask for help matters, and then just have a great time. I'm getting ready to go for a swim. Got my flippers over here, got my mask. Go enjoy life. And going out and enjoying life and doing fun stuff is a lot easier when you know what to expect and how to deal with the little issues. Even a couple of weeks ago, I was way out there, like 2, 3, 4, I don't know, 6 kilometers that way on the other side of that boat. I'm walking down this trail and I see these spider webs. I'm like, that looks kind of suspicious. Big old spider. And to my own fault, I hadn't done any research to see, if there's any spiders I don't know in the area. And, there is a poisonous spider here. It's not fatal, but it'll leave a nice little welt or wound. But before I went to the Philippines, I knew about the different types of cobras, because those are pretty fatal. I knew about a lot of the other endemic species, and I knew how to respond to them. Before I went backpacking in bear country, I knew how to deal with bears. Before I went into cougar country, I knew how to respond to a cougar. I know how to respond to an elk, to all those wild animals, pigs. People just laugh when you say this, but pigs are really dangerous. Wild feral pigs, if there's a group of them, super dangerous. And people don't appreciate that. So you got to kind of know where you're going, know what you're getting yourself into. Sea snakes. I was on a floating bar in the Philippines and go in the bathroom, and there's a sea snake in the bathroom. Like, evidently it had been in the toilet earlier, but it was in the bathroom. And then I go talk to the gal at the bar. She's like, oh yeah, it'll leave in a little bit, then you can use the bathroom. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? And I hadn't really done enough research on sea snakes. I knew they were docile, but I didn't understand how they bite. So, they're one of the most venomous snakes on the planet. Kill you in minutes, if I remember right. But getting bit by them is a challenge, and you really got to kind of screw with them for them to bite you. The number of people that get bitten are trivial. And then the bartender, the other bartender comes in. She's like, oh yeah, and she opens the cupboard. I'm sitting at this bar, Puerto Galera, and she opens the cupboard, and there's a sea snake in a bucket, like chilling under the bar. And she's like, yeah, there's one under here today too. Check it out. And I'm like, this is like one of the most deadliest snakes in the world. And I was kind of freaked out about it. But what I do, I went and did some research, and I'm like, okay, now I understand. And then, 6 months later, I see one in the water. Didn't freak me out at all. I got my camera out, I was respectful of it, gave it plenty of distance. But, going back to my childhood, knowing's half the battle, right? And if you don't know, you don't know. But you need to know that you don't know. And you need to know where to get those answers. So, be a little more self-reliant. Be a little more self-accountable. And go enjoy the world. Go enjoy the world. I never knew how easy travel was until I made that first trip to the Philippines by myself. And then my eyes went, wow. For the price I went on that first trip, maybe one day I'll break down the price of that first trip in 2018, but I think most people would be stunned, shocked, and wouldn't believe me how cheap it was for me to go to the Philippines, on multiple trips. And then I just decided to screw it. I'm tired of paying the airfare. I want to go someplace, and that's where the whole bucket list on a budget came from. And that's how I ended up here in Albania, loving life. So that's what I got. Know what you know what you don't know when to ask for help, who to ask for help, and go enjoy life. Don't go to the internet looking for medical advice. Go to the internet asking, where can I get this? Go to the internet asking, where can I get seen? Where can I talk to a professional? Where can I seek professional help? Those are great questions. Those are great places to utilize that resource if you're still on Facebook or other social medias. Do that instead. I think I've repeated myself enough. They say you got to say it 3 times to be remembered. I think I said it 8 or 10 or 12 times. So if you don't remember by now, I don't know what to tell you. But have a great day.